Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today's top story. The first story is about the majors happening in Syria, and if you are following that story, Turkey downed an Su-24, a Russian, and later on when there was this rescue helicopter to look after and rather to pick up the Russian pilot that came under attack, and one of the Russian soldiers were also killed. One of the pilot was killed, the other one was, earlier we heard he was captured, but later on we got to know that that was rescued by the Syrian army. Now, soft rebels versus the Turkmen out there, what exactly is happening? What persuaded Turkey to shoot down that Su-24? As far as Putin or Russia is concerned, Kremlin says that we are stabbed in the back. Russian foreign minister cancelled the trip to Turkey, and now a lot more is happening on that front, and we'll be talking about that in detail in our first segment. The second story is about the intolerance in India. It started the moment Narendra Modi got into power, but later on the development is pretty significant, and it seems as if India is only for the Hindus, not for the minorities. The way the rights of the Muslims, they have been challenged there, that is of prime concern, not only for the Muslims living in India, but for all those living outside India. We'll be talking about that in detail as well. And the third story is about the T20 series that is going to start from tomorrow. Earlier, Pakistan won the Test series 2-0 and lost 3-1 to England in the ODIs. But this is going to be pretty interesting because Pakistan need to win at least 2-1 to retain their second position. This is going to be our third story. We're talking about the first story. We've prepared a package. Let's watch it and then we'll continue our discussion, and I'll also introduce you to our guests and the panel.
Turkey's military said the fighter was shot down by two of its F-16s after it violated Turkish airspace 10 times within a 5-minute period. But Moscow bitterly criticized Turkey for downing the Su-24 plane, which it insisted was in Syrian airspace. Breaking off military contacts with Turkey, Russia's defense ministry said a cruiser equipped with an air defense system would be deployed in the Mediterranean to destroy any targets representing a potential danger for Russian forces in Syria. Russia claimed that one of the two pilots who ejected from the craft was killed by gunfire from the ground as he descended. A Russian Marine was also killed on a helicopter mission to rescue the crew of the downed jet. He died when his helicopter came under fire from rebels in northern Syria, where the plane crashed. Syrian rebels say they blew up the helicopter shortly after it landed within an anti-tank missile, releasing footage of the attack. An emergency meeting of all 28 members of NATO was held in Brussels on the request of Turkey. Speaking after the meeting, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said the military alliance stood by member Turkey. He, however, appealed for calm.
We have repeatedly made clear we stand in solidarity with Turkey and support the territorial integrity of our NATO ally, Turkey. What we are calling for now is calm and de-escalation. This is a serious situation. This is a situation which calls on that we all are prudent and that we all contribute to de-escalating the situation. And that's also the reason why I welcome further contacts between Moscow and Ankara. There has been contacts, and we would welcome even more contacts too.
UN spokesman says Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is seriously concerned about downing of Russian plane and has appealed to all parties to urgently de-escalate the rising tension. US President Barack Obama has assured his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan in a phone call of the support of US for his country's right to defend its sovereignty. Obama, however, said calls for measures to discourage any kind of escalation. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said his forces had been acting within their rules of engagement. Putin branded the shooting down of its aircraft a stab in the back committed by accomplices of terrorists, warning the tragic event will have serious consequences for Russian-Turkish relations. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov scrapped a planned visit to Turkey Wednesday and warned Russians against traveling to Turkey. He said the risk of attacks is no less of a threat than in Egypt, where all 224 people on board a Russian passenger jet were killed in October in an attack claimed by the Islamic State.
To talk about the story, we have with us in our studio on my right is Dr. Tughral Yamin, expert on foreign affairs. So thank you very much for taking out your time. We also have with us Dr. Aqab Malik. He is the defense analyst and is from the National Defense University. Thank you very much, Dr. Aqab. Starting from you, Dr. Tughral, now the downing of this Su-24 by the Turkish authorities, do you think that has created more problems in the region rather than solving the issue?
You're absolutely right. The downing of the plane has complicated issues. But Syria is already an explosive cocktail. More than 65 air forces are operating in their congested skies. And Russians have been violating Turkish airspace. This is not the first time. The Turks have already brought down one of their drones, which the Russians say did not belong to it. And if you also see the bombing patterns, the NATO has been bombing on the eastern side, these people have been bombing on the western side. The bombing patterns indicate that each party is bombing either forces for Assad or those who are opposed to Assad. So nobody is really genuine in their cause to eliminate.
Everybody has their own vested interest, Dr. Tughral. And looking at that particular region, I mean, this particular plane went in for around 17 seconds. That's what we have learned. 17 seconds, I mean, when a plane is traveling at 1300 kilometers an hour, obviously 17 seconds isn't much. And at the same time, the nature of the incursion wasn't hostile either. I mean, it went inside, but it never had any hostile design for the Turkish.
Faisal Saab, 17 seconds in modern warfare is a lot of time. And the pilots are supposed to act in nanoseconds. It's a very long time. 17 seconds, if I am on the controls of an F-16, it's a very long time for me. And if I'm sending you warnings, then you better obey those warnings. No, I don't think it was something which could not have been accepted.
But the Russians said they've never had any hostile designs.
What do you mean by hostile designs? You cross my territory, I'll shoot you down. Why should I tolerate you? The Russians have been doing it. The Turks have been warning them. You can see papers for last few weeks. They've been doing it. And the Turks have been on record. They've been telling them, please don't do it. This area is very sensitive to Turkey. It's the soft underbelly of Turkey. The people who live there, Turkmen Syrians, are dear to their hearts. It's like Pakistan, Afghan with Pakistanis supporting the Pashtuns on the other side. So it's just like that. They have the tribal affiliations.
But interestingly, Turkish authorities are targeting the Kurds there. But yes, as far as the Turkmen is concerned, yes, I mean, though they are anti-Bashar al-Assad regime, but still having said that, they are, the Turkish have a soft corner for them. So it's a very confusing
nature of the beast is very complex over here. You see, the Turks are fighting the Syrians, the Kurds, because the Kurds are against them. The PKK is their sworn enemy.
Correct.
There have been 2 attacks in Ankara in the past few weeks in which over 100 people have been killed. Absolutely. And the blame has gone to Kurds. And the Russians say that the Turks are only targeting Kurds and they're not targeting IS. So this is a mutual blame game is going on. They are also blaming Turkey for allowing the IS to export their oil from their territories in Syria and Iraq to the outside world. So this is something which is going on. I can't take sides, but the fact of the matter is 17 seconds, if you intrude into my territory, if your high-speed jets are flying, they can bring you down. If there are warnings there, then you cannot blame the other side of not telling you not to intrude into my territory. So that is one thing. But the situation is very, very complex. It's very murky. People are not very sure. There's no clear-cut divisions of who is supporting whom. And since Syria is a country which is totally lost its sovereignty, you see 65 air forces operating in your air. One, airspace management is a very, very complex issue. Secondly, how can you stop one party from it? And Russia has already got a base in Tartus, the naval base. And they've got this. They've
sent another destroyer there.
They've sent another destroyer, and next door to Turkey, on the other side, they have occupied Crimea. So,
but that region, the belly of Turkey, I mean, especially that is a gateway for the Russians towards Crimea and the Black Sea.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, that is something really important for the Russians. I mean, this is where their weakness is, and they don't want that any country, whether it's Turkey or the NATO, shouldn't exploit that in any manner.
It's equally sensitive for both areas. You see, Syria and Iraq were part of the Ottoman Empire. It was part of Turkey, and Hatta, the province over there, part of it was sovereign territory of Turkey, because about a few months back, one of their kings, Suleiman Shah, was buried about 20 kilometers inside Hatta.
That's good.
And they had deployed their forces over there. Now they have relocated the grave nearer to the border. But Turks are sensitive about the area. Russians are sensitive because they think that people are infiltrating from the Turk sides for the IS. So it's a complex game, and you cannot take sides really.
All right. Moving on to you, Dr. Aqab. Now, obviously, I would like you to comment on the same question which I had earlier put to Dr. Tughril, that who's to be blamed? Don't you think this has really complicated the situation? At the same time, now, the Russian foreign minister has cancelled his trip to Turkey. It is believed that they'll be having a lot of problems as far as the, I will not call that economic sanctions over Turkey, but things will really get complicated because the energy source is Russia, especially you're talking about gas. And as far as Russian businesses are concerned, they've even told their tourists not to go to Turkey. So things are really getting complicated. And that statement coming from Putin that the Turkish, they have stabbed in our back. Now that's a statement and a half. How do you see that?
I'm going to go into the larger picture. I'm a strategist, so I see the larger picture here rather than just look at the tactics themselves and look at the reasons why this has happened in the first place. And you've got an evolving situation when Dr. Tughril talked about a naval base that Russia wants to protect because it wants to project its power into the Mediterranean. The outlet from the Black Sea, for example, the Black Sea Fleet, Crimea and Sevastopol, is through the Bosphorus. That can be closed at any time because Turkey is part of NATO. And whatever NATO wants, Turkey will do. And this is when we come to the larger picture. Is it really just about Turkey? Or is it about something larger and the confrontation between the superpower, the United States, and its NATO allies, as a result, and the Russians? And their interests, which are very different in Syria. And given that the Turks are with NATO and as a result supporting the United States, but they have their own interests, you've got to see it in a larger picture. You can't divorce Turkey from the larger picture as far as the United States is concerned. And so when you see the downing of the Russian jet, it is, for me, a situation where, as Dr. Tughril said earlier on, the Russians were going through Turkish airspace a number of times beforehand. For me, it is a point of prodding the enemy. The Russians are trying to prod their enemy to see where the defenses are, how far they can go to see what the reaction would be. And this is just one of those reactions. If you look back a few years ago, in 2011, when the Americans killed, what was it, 24 Pakistanis in Salalah.
Yeah.
That was a culmination of a number of proddings into Pakistani airspace by American jets and NATO or Allied Forces jets who were in Afghanistan to see how Pakistan would react. And we always said at that point, they've crossed the red line. You can come close to the red line. Is the red line the border, or it is an attack on the army post, for example? How far do you go before you go past the red line? And as far as Pakistan was concerned at that time, it was attacking the soldiers without any preemption whatsoever. If you take that analogy and then you go to Turkey, I see it as a form of prodding to see where the reaction is. Great powers do this at all points of interaction. You've got two large great powers. You've got many other powers in support of different countries. The Iranians with the Russians to an extent because they're with Bashar al-Assad. And the other European nations who are there also with the Americans, with NATO. You have two large forces and there's no buffer zone. Inevitably, it's going to happen where there's a casualty. This is where, when you have mobilization, one of the most dangerous aspects of mobilization is you have two large armies next to each other, and something can go wrong, and it can escalate very easily. And they've had protocols to do that. Will it escalate or
not now? That is a million-dollar question. Dr. Saab, if you allow me, we have been joined by an Arab journalist, Jamal Ismail. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much for taking out your time and talking to us. Jamal, now looking at the current Syrian situation, a Russian U-24 was shot down by the Turkish, and that has really created a lot of problem. The French president was in USA now. the French are not ready to send their ground troops over there. At the same time, the Americans have vowed that they'll be with the French and also have supported the idea of the NATO. But still, I mean, as far as Europe is concerned, nothing has been very clear. I mean, they're very cautious as far as issuing a statement is concerned about that particular incident which took place yesterday. At the same time, the Russian foreign minister has cancelled his trip to Turkey. Now, there seems to be a big problem out there as well. And if you look at what has been reported by RT, it seems that it is an absolute problem of the Turkish. Russians were absolutely innocent. Your take on this, sir?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. According to the Turkish statement that Russian Sukhoi aircraft have violated the sovereignty of Turkish state. It has been 3 times before it was shut down. And if this happened, that it crossed the airspace of Turkey, it is the sovereignty of Turkey and the right of Turkish forces to shoot it down, as Pakistan have some time ago. They have won an Indian aeroplane before it reached the space of Pakistan, and that Indian aeroplane have fled away. Otherwise, Pakistan aircraft, they have shot down some some Indian aeroplanes when they crossed in Kashmir during Kargil crisis. It is the right and the sovereignty of the state to defend itself. And the Russians, they are, according to many countries and to the people of Syria, they are invaders, and the invader have no right to invade any country. Because majority of Syrian people, they consider the regime of Bashar al-Assad, it is illegitimate regime, and it has no right to invite foreign forces to invade and to kill.
One more point, Jumal Ismail. I totally understand this Turkish authorities, they have the right to look after the sovereignty of their country and to safeguard their borders. But having said that, don't you think if this was avoided, things would have been different? Now, it seems that every country has their own vested interest. Turkmen fighting against the Bashar al-Assad regime are being supported by the Turkish authorities. And at the same time, having said that, it is also believed that certain area where that plane actually went was the area for smuggling, because it is also believed that ISIS is selling oil to Turkey. And at the same time, the gateway for the Turkish troops to get inside that area and to fight against Bashar al-Assad supporters, that was another concern. Don't you think, I mean, it is the vested interest which it was safeguarding rather than looking after the overall situation?
The area where the Russian airplane was shot down, there was no presence of ISIS fighters there. It is not under command or control of ISIS. It is very far from there. There are some Syrian fighters who are from Turkish origin, Turkmen people, but they are Syrian people, Syrian fighters against rebels against Bashar al-Assad regime. Yes, I agree that the aeroplane have, when it was shut down, it landed on Syrian land, not on Turkish side. But some parts of it have fallen on the Turkish land, which up to some extent, I'm not expert on the border there, up to some extent it legitimized the Turkish statement on this. Also, this
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jumal Ismail, for your comments. Now, coming back to you, Dr. Aqab. Now, the UK authorities have also asked the Turkish government to contact the Russians and to sort this issue out. Do you think that is a viable proposition? Will it happen? And what sort of an engagement that would be?
I think what will happen is that if the Turks don't engage with the Russians and try to resolve this matter, there'll be more polarization between the two, which leads to further in-group, out-group dynamics, meaning the Turks will go in one direction, the Russians will another, and that's more potential for further conflict and escalation. And I don't think they want that. I think they're going to realign themselves. There's a bigger game at play here, we know that, between larger countries, and Turkey's in the middle of it. Has its own interests, and I feel that for certainty, if that aircraft was in Turkish airspace, and it's been warned many times not to be in there, then Turkey has every right to shoot it down because there's an act of war. To go into another airspace with a military aircraft without permission, you're invading another airspace, another country's sovereign territory and their airspace. And as they've been warned on this, that sets the red lines now. Now that red lines are being set, the Russians know how far to go and how far not to go in that respect. And it sets the rules for the continuation of this conflict to an extent between different parties. And a lot of the countries are going to be defining these rules for themselves. Turkey being on the ground there, and other European nations not so. They're the ones who are intimately involved more so than most of the countries. As a result, I feel that engagement is absolutely necessary, but we also have to look at the fact that this is a public affairs campaign as well. Everything that Putin says is choreographed. It has to be choreographed. Nothing can just be said on the spur. That can cause many other factors to come into play which are not intended. So they have to choreograph everything. The idea of stabbed in the back. What does stab in the back mean? When you have a friend and they do something wrong, then that's a stab in the back. But is Turkey a friend of the Russians? Turkey is part of NATO. There are defined lines of interaction and there are SOPs between the two and understanding of what interaction should be. One may step over the line, but they need to be told not to do so if they've told many a time. And this is where you define the red lines, I think.
All right.
It's a defining point in this conflict, I think, between the different nations.
All right. Now, so looking at the overall role of NATO, that has been there, and it is believed that when you have NATO in the backyard of the Russians, they have a problem. And that makes absolute sense. Now, looking at what has happened recently, another important point. Now, the Russians, I mean, if you go back a little and look what happened during the Crimea crisis or Ukraine crisis, they put their foot down and they made sure that what they wanted, they achieved it. That was step number one. Step number two, the Syrians called for help by the Russian authorities to fight against ISIL. They said yes, and they are in the game. Now, it seems that the Americans, since they are there for quite some time, they're controlling the Middle Eastern countries, pro-American Middle Eastern countries, and at the same time they have issues with Chinese in the South China Sea. They have issues over here with the Russians, and they have hegemonic designs for the entire area. I mean, not for the area, for the entire globe, I would say. The unipolar concept. That is not accepted by the Russians anymore. So sending that destroyer into the region, now they're taking a lot of other measures. It is also believed that that might have boots on ground in Syria as well, the Russians. Where will that lead, sir? Because there are soft rebels supported by the Americans and the NATO and the Turkish and the rest, and the Saudis even, and the G6 countries. If you look at the latest equation with the French and the Qatar, more than $6 billion worth of ammunition was sold to them. $12 billion worth of ammunition was sold to the Saudis by the French. So it seems that the G6 plus the NATO, I mean, they're on the same page, but Iran, Syria and the Russians and the Chinese seem to be on the other side. The only thing that is where the real problem is. And one more point, so I also want you to throw light on is, Pakistan was sucked into this war against terrorism and we suffered for 15 years, we are still suffering. Don't you think a similar situation has been, I mean not done, but has happened to Turkey?
Faisal Sahab, I think Pakistan is lucky in a sense that the international telescopes have turned away from our terrorism and has shifted to Paris, Daesh and ISIS, ISIL, whatever. But yes, the situation is complex. There are great vested interests in play. If Russia chooses to inject its ground troops into Syria, I think it would be a recipe for disaster. I don't think Russian troops are familiar with that territory, and I don't think they have any sentiments, real sentiments involved in the Syrian crisis. Yes, I can agree that in the case of Ukraine and Crimea, they had some kind of interest because Crimea was, after all, once upon a time, part of the Soviet Russia, and it was actually Khrushchev who had declared that Crimea should be gifted to Ukraine, and Ukraine subsequently became independent. But here, I don't think that kind of motivation would be there for the Russians to fight it out, and it could be a replay of what happened in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, the Russian soldiers, Soviet soldiers were actually beaten back because they could not. They had gone to support a friendly government, but they had no willingness to fight for them and lay down their lives for a country which was alien to them. So I don't think Syria is one place where they should be actually putting boots on ground. The Americans don't want to become part of it. The tactics or strategy that they had adopted previously was arming rebels who were against the Syrian government, but that failed, and Obama actually gave up on that because he thought that the money was going down the drain. The French will not put boots on ground because French army is not very big, so they can send in their rapid reaction forces to conflict zones in Africa. They have an aircraft carrier, but you see, they don't have expeditionary forces actually to disgorge.
The last question before I move on to the next segment. Do these allies, the NATO and their allies, do they exactly know who the enemy is? Because Russia is targeting the hardcore ISIL, right, or all those elements against Bashar al-Assad's regime. But when it comes to the Western interests, obviously it's al-Nusra, it's the Turkmen, it's the soft rebels, it's the Kurds. I mean, there are a lot of problems.
You're absolutely right. There is no common enemy. Everybody has his own perceived enemy. So the Iranians and the Russians will target people who are against Bashar al-Assad, and the Americans or the Brits or the other people would target people who are against who are part of the Syrian government, or who are supporting, because they want Bashar al-Assad to step down. Saudi Arabia wants Bashar al-Assad to step down. So each country has its own stooges to support.
Well, that's a very interesting equation, because Americans want that Bashar al-Assad should stay for some time and later on he should step down.
Yes.
But the Turkish and the Saudis and Qatar, they want him to step down immediately.
Yeah.
And that is
the Americans
where the solution
are worried
is.
because they have already had their fingers burnt once they removed Saddam Hussein. The vacuum was filled up by forces who
well,
were
Syria
beyond
at the
their
same
control.
time, one should give some credit to the regime also, that they have never let themselves sort of become subservient to the Americans. They've always had their own say, and that is where the problem is.
The reason is they had strong supporters. They have supporters in form of Russia, and they have supporters in form of Iran. And in fact, you see, when the Americans were about to strike them about a few years back, because of the gas attacks, it was Russia who bailed them out. They said, okay, we'll become part of
Syrians
OPCW.
had to surrender 1,000 tons of chemical weapons.
But the Russians found that loophole in the statement of Obama, and therefore they became signatories to the CWC.
All right. Thank you very much, Tughal Saab, for your comments. And time to move on to our next segment. And Dr. Aqab, you'll stay with us to talk about that. The next topic is about the growing intolerance in India. Whether we talk about the sort of aggression faced by Amir Khan, their superstar, by the BJP extremists, or you talk about Allah Rakha Rahman, known as A.R. Rahman. We've prepared a package, let's watch it.
Bollywood superstar Amir Khan joined the outcry against intolerance, saying he was alarmed over growing extremism in India. Amir Khan said his wife Kiran Rao even suggested that they should leave the country. Addressing a journalism award ceremony, Amir said a sense of insecurity and fear had been growing in India. Earlier this month, fellow superstar Shah Rukh Khan also spoke out against what he called extreme intolerance in India. A movement that began with writers returning state awards has spread to scientists, historians and filmmakers. They have cited the killing of rationalist M.M. Kalburgi and Govind Pansare, as well as the lynching of a man over suspicions he had consumed beef, as examples of rising intolerance in the country. Endorsing the viewpoint of writers and intellectuals, Amir said creative people were returning their awards to express dissatisfaction with the state of affairs. Expressing deep anguish over the Dadri incident, Amir Khan slammed the political response to it and held that any act of violence is condemnable. Khan's comments have sharply divided sentiment on social media, with hashtag Amir Khan emerging as the top Twitter trend in India. Bollywood actor Anupam Kher, who has been extremely vocal in his opposition to artists protesting intolerance, was quick to attack Khan's statement in a series of tweets. Amir's comments have also evoked the strongest reaction from the Indian ruling party, Bharatiya Janata Party.
Now, Dr. Aqab, growing intolerance in India, and what is happening at the moment, I mean, whether it's about banning the beef in certain states, or you talk about a statement coming from the governor of Assam that India is only for the Hindus, and then the Prime Minister visiting the RSS headquarters and appreciating their role, and then, certain statements coming from the Dhaka University when he was visiting there that, I was a part of the whole deal. What exactly is brewing in the mind of the Indian Premier?
I guess you got to see where he's from. Where does he come from? He comes from those masses and represents them in the best way possible as far as he sees. I don't see that he sees beyond that. He looks at his origins and he sees these people as his own, his base, his support, the reason why, the rationale why he's there. And you have to appreciate their level of education, their understanding, their background, their social deprivation model comes into play there as well. And the lack of tolerance, as we all know, is generally due to, but not always, the lack of education generally within that particular society or social group. When you say a prime minister or a governor or anybody else making particular statements, you can't talk about their education, but what you can talk about is them pandering to the masses to gain political favor and capital. And this is what it's really about, isn't it?
Favor, by the way.
Sorry?
I mean, you're talking about just boycotting at least 20–25% of the overall population of India, and these are, I'm talking about the minorities, in particular the Muslims.
You know, I've been talking about this a lot before, and I've been raking my brain about exactly what this situation is about. Not just this recent situation, but the relationship between Pakistan and India in essence as well, because that's an extension of this situation to an extent. I'm trying to understand it from a historical perspective, that majority, if not only a few, maybe a couple of thousand years ago, invasions came from the northwest, came from this region. We always came from this region to dominate India from there. And the whole idea, the Aryans and from there who gave the Veda, in essence, that's a controversial remark, but I'll say that.
And that's a reality too.
That's a reality. And a social conditioning of the process to reduce people to be able to rule over them. Look at the mindset now. There's a rebellion here. There's a rise in India. India power is growing. There's a certain pride in the Indians that they're moving forward in something. And that's from the masses, essentially. Other people can rationalize beyond that because they see through their exposure and education that they can rationalize ideas beyond that. But the masses generally cannot. And there are a large percent of the masses that are very highly uneducated and in poverty. But they have the votes. And there are very large political force. And they see it in traditional ideas. Traditional ideas, the masses came from here. Pakistan has gone separate, but these people are still here. And maybe there are agents, for example, me in Pakistan. Pakistan's people, perception. There's approximately 180 million Muslims, for example, in India. Nearly the population of Pakistan, which is very, very close to that. And they represent a non-India, because Islam to them, to the Hindus, was non-indigenous. It came from outside. It came from the northwest and beyond. And Hinduism is India, because it was apparently from here, meaning India. As a result, people go back to the core values. I've seen this in different contexts.
Even in the 21st century, when Narendra Modi is talking about the digital India.
21st century for who? What is 21st century? You go to Afghanistan, there's no 21st century there. I've been to Afghanistan many times in midst of war and see the depravity of human beings. That we talk about humanity, but what is humanity when we're slaughtering ourselves? There's no humanity in the world. It's a concept that we derive to culture ourselves to seem that we're higher than animals, but in fact, I don't see that many a time. When you talk about humanity for the Indians, you've got to see from their perspective. You've got to see from their understanding, from their lens, and how they're brought up and what understanding they have through their culture that they adopt, the ideas from their peer groups, from the leadership which provides that culture and the traditions and sets a course for that. And you'll see where Modi is from. He's from there. He's from that group, and he rose from there, and he represents them, and he's an icon of power for them.
Is he a threat for the entire region, especially for Pakistan?
Well, he's now a statesman.
The kind of hegemonic designs he has for India.
Well, you know, there's practical designs, or there's something that's just in his mind as a fantasy, because a lot of people have dreams, but you know when you wake up, they're not reality. I think when you have a great quote, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he being at the top of the ladder now in India, has immense power. Coming from where he did, imagine the type of mindset he has and the ideas he had and the way he came there and the ambitions he had to get there. He climbed a very tall ladder.
Oh, yes.
And against many hurdles.
Sir, if you allow me, sir, we've been joined in by Air Marshal retired Shahid Latif. Assalamu alaikum, Shahid Sahab.
Ji, walaikum assalam.
Shahzad, talking about the recent happenings in India, whether it was the aggression of the BJP or their extremist elements against Amir Khan or A.R. Rahman or other known Muslim entities, I would say. And at the same time, now it seems, I mean, just look at the statement issued by the wife of Amir Khan that this place is no more safe for us. And they're practically thinking of leaving India and settling somewhere else. So what exactly is happening out there in India? And earlier, as mentioned by my fellow guest here, sir, he believes that since Indians were always invaded from the northwest side, so that particular philosophy still is there. And they have that feeling that Hinduism was the core in India, but since the religion Islam came, and that was not for the indigenous people out there. So that could be the real problem, sir?
Yes, first of all, it is unprecedented. The way Hindu extremism is manifesting itself in India today, this has never been the case in the entire history of India. I think this is desperation on the part of Indians, that they have been trying to find identity for the Hindus, and they think the others have been dominating the society. And they now have a leader today that himself is part of the terrorist organization, and that terrorist organization has been now let loose. There is a definite support to that organization. It can go around and commit all sorts of crimes, and there is open terrorism being displayed in India, and from the top leadership, there is virtually no check. So I think world over, India is earning a very bad name, and this message is now going across to every nook and corner of the world. And the fact that that a lot of notables in India are getting up and speaking about against the system, in which you have some of these actors, some of these scholars, others who have openly come up and even are throwing those awards that have been earned by them in the face of the government. So I think India is really stooping very low by not checking this extraordinary wave of Hinduism that is virtually occupying minds of all the Hindus. So I think in the long run, it is going to hurt India. And very soon, people will actually start to migrate and start to leave the country, and the notables. So, and from the Prime Minister side and from the leadership, there has not even been a statement of condemnation for those who are indulging in such activities. I think that speaks very low of the leadership, and particularly their Prime Minister in his campaign for elections. He was actually raising slogans about being anti-Muslim, about being anti-Pakistan, and taking pride in what he did in Gujarat when there was cold-blooded murder of thousands of Muslims when he was the chief minister over there. So I think this is good. What is happening in India is good. Ultimately, the true color of India, which out. And it's a matter of time that the world would realize how India has been hiding itself, how it has been trying to cover itself in the name of secularism, and an India that is tolerant to all. Where it is intolerant.
Totally agree with you on that front. Thank you very much, Air Marshal Shahid Latif Saab. Now, Doctor, a couple of more points I want you to throw light on. First one is about, well, we do understand that anti-India sentiments, they do sell in India. Sorry, anti-Pakistan sentiments do sell in India. And when you're talking about elections, okay, that is a part of their campaign. And it works. And it worked for Narendra Modi also. More than he expected, interestingly. Then it comes to the second phase. That is about the anti-Muslim sentiments. Oh, yes. A lot of Hindus are gathering and getting together against the Muslims. That makes another very valid point. But don't you think this is going to be the biggest fault line in India? And they need to learn from what has happened in other parts of the world also, whether you talk about Shia versus Sunni or whatever. Look at Syria, look at Pakistan, look at so many other Middle Eastern countries. They are actually putting their hand inside the mouth of the lion, and that is where the problem is. Do you think that can actually work out the other way?
I think there is a polarization between the communities. There's no doubt there is. The Muslim communities in India feel more and more insecure as the day goes by. Even the actors are saying this aloud. High-profile figures are saying this. You have a reaction, and every polarization when two parties move apart, hostility builds up, tension builds up, friction builds up. These groups themselves, therefore, reinforce that polarization by what we call in-group, out-group dynamics, where one group feels itself need to be better than another group and compounds that polarization by making itself feel better and above others by reducing others. And this is what the majority is doing now, unfortunately. By reducing the Muslim population as a reaction to 100 years of rule. I mean, they bring history into it. Look at what happened in the Balkans. 800 years of history previously came into the conflict in the mid-90s when Serbia was killing the Bosnian Muslims, for example, and Croats. What has that got to do with present times, you might think? But that has everything to do with it. Human beings need meaning for whatever they do. They try to justify their actions to feel better. People feel better as part of a group.
Benefits, more powerful?
More powerful.
Command the authority?
Authority. They feel better and more empowered when they're with a larger party that's better than others, perceivedly. You know? So they reinforce that action. And both parties will increasingly do that, which means more potential for greater conflict. That means tearing the country apart. Do we want that? No, I don't think we really want that, because that could cause a massive rift in global economy. Other countries could be susceptible to other forms of terrorism. Pakistan could come under the light. India could blame us for everything which has nothing to do with us, and it's a homegrown issue for India. They use that as trilateral compellence in any case, saying that we've been attacked by this, that, and the other party that may have some links with Pakistan, so we take concessions out of Pakistan from other parties trying to intervene. I've done this as a part of a policy to an extent, and it's occurring every single time. And this may be another occasion where they're trying to produce that to enlighten them. But I think this is self-destructive action for India itself.
Well, that is the punchline. This is going to be the self-destructive element. I mean, that is where the problem is, and this could be the biggest fault line of the Indians. And if that is exploited, India is going to have it. Anyway, Dr. Saab, thank you very much for taking out your time and being a part, and definitely we'll be having you in our regular shows as well, sir. Time to move on to our third segment, and that is about the T20 series that is going to be starting from tomorrow between Pakistan and England in UAE. Let's watch this package.
Afridi-led Pakistan side will be defending its second position in the ICC T20 ranking when they take on England tomorrow in the first T20 of the three-match series in UAE. Rafatullah Mawan has been included in the T20 squad for the first time. Bilal Asif has replaced Imad Wasim, while Iftikhar Ahmed is the 16th player of the squad. Umar Akmal has also been included in the squad after all allegations on him were cleared. Pakistan bagged the Test series 2-0 under Misbah-ul-Haq's captaincy, while England beat Azhar Ali and co 3-1 in the ODI. The T20 series will announce the ultimate winner in the tour. Pakistan are 14 points ahead of the 8th place England, which means Afridi must lead the team to victory to ensure that they stay put on the second position. Sri Lanka is leading the ranking as reigning world champions. Pakistan has won its last two series against Zimbabwe and Sri Lanka. England is coming to the field with high morale as well after defeating Pakistan in 50-over format. The two games will be played in Dubai, while the final will take place in Sharjah Sheikh Zayed Cricket Stadium.
To talk about it, we have with us Chishti Mujahid Saab, needs no introduction. Chishti Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, assalamu alaikum to all the viewers, and a very good evening to us.
Chishti Saab, beating England in UAE 2-0 in the Test series, and then losing to the same side 3-1 after winning the first ODI. And now we are talking about the T20. Where did we go wrong as far as the ODI is concerned, and what needs to be done to make sure that the team performs?
Well, I think we did very well in the Test series, although morally we lost the first Test match. Remember that if it had not been for the light rule, Pakistan were on the losing side in that match. Which means that this England side are not the 2012 side. There are no pushovers. And as such, the Test series wasn't as much of a cakewalk as what had been expected. The one-day series, Pakistan has been a bit weak on the one-day international scene for the last couple of years. And I think here the planning, the shuffling of the batting order, and all sorts of tinkering and fidgeting with the Pakistan lineup, that has what resulted in. We haven't got a settled side in the one-day international. Come the 2020, I think we are very good at that. We are number 2, if my memory serves me right, in the ICC ranking. And there is no reason why we should not retain that ranking. We can't improve it because England are fairly down in the 2020 ranking of the ICC. Pakistan have a balanced side, although at the moment I think because of the absence of Imad Wasim owing to injury, because he had performed extremely well in the earlier series, particularly in the 2020 format. And also I'm surprised that Yasir Shah has not been included in the side, and he's playing league cricket in Bangladesh. So apart from that, Pakistan well served in batting with Rafatullah Mohammed coming in. I hope he plays. He's quite an ebullient, effervescent 39-year-old who deserves to be included in the side and given a full run. Let him play all the 3 one-day internationals. And Pakistan have got Mohammad Rizwan, they've got Sarfaraz Ahmed as their other batting wonder. And of course, you have Ahmed Shahzad, Mohammad Hafiz. Shahid Afridi could come down late in the order and tonk a few. And bowling, Wahab Riaz and the pace bowlers, and then of course the young spinners as well.
All right. Anyway, Mujasab, thank you very much for your comments, sir. And that's all we have for this hour. And let's hope Pakistan plays proper T20 cricket. Though it is going to be pretty interesting under the captaincy of Shahid Afridi. A lot of sixes, a lot of fours. That is what T20 is all about. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, you take care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.